This episode covers our dynasty rankings for hitters. We thankfully won't cover catchers because we did that in a previous episode with pitchers. Circle back if you haven't yet, but we are taking stock of our rankings at each hitter position after covering the catchers, as previously mentioned. It's time for Dingers!
This is Dingers, way more than fantasy baseball. We keep it real when we talk and knock it straight out the park. Let's see the stats, what's the average draft position? What kind of plays you making? Check the wins above replacement, check the lineups and the points. This I gotta see, what's your path to victory? Are they aiming for a dynasty? Get points going head to head, please don't do me no favors. We're always watching waivers, ain't no minor league, this is major, yeah. Dingers, let's go.
Welcome to Dingers, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. It's not just Willie Adames that wins you championships. That's why week in and week out, we're delivering tips and strategies to help you live that straight up OG lifestyle. Tyler Chaz joined again by Robbie Baseball from the Murder Room. What's happening, Robbie?
Words is tough tonight, but we will get through.
My name is always tough for those that don't
for you.
Watch the behind the scenes. Like I mess up my name more than any human should mess up their name. But like I say it all the time. Like, how many times do you say your full name out loud? Like you just don't. So I'm going to take a pass on that one. But I appreciate the tip.
Yeah, well, happy Saturday night to everybody that's checking in with us on the live stream, and thank you for everybody that listens to this when it comes out as a podcast. You can find us on Twitter at DingersPod. You can find Ty at TourneyBoss. You can find myself at RobbieBaseball1. If you are listening to us right now live and you have a question about our rankings, you can put it in the chat below. We will get it through Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, through the Twitter machine even. So yeah, you can definitely keep in contact with us for this. Tonight, what we're planning on doing, Ty, is we're talking 5 up, 5 down. So we're going through our rankings preseason. So as mentioned before, and I even tripped over it in the intro, the starting pitchers and the catchers we covered 2 episodes ago. Tonight we're going to go through first base, second base, shortstop, third base, and outfielders. And we're going to talk about guys that have a lot of movement coming up the rankings and a lot of movement coming down the rankings at the respective positions. So yeah, like when you're ready, I am ready.
Okay.
A long time ago, someone decided to put stuff in glass bottles. In some of these bottles, they put juice or milk, and that was stupid. Today, only alcohol and a few other products remain in the containers from the gods. It's time for beers and bourbon, because good advice only comes in a bottle.
Every time I open my bottle, I think of Bull Durham and the guy with all of the sound effects in the radio booth when the team's on the road.
Yeah,
just every time I do it. Yeah. And a double into the gap. Makes me laugh every time.
Yeah. Classic radio. Yeah, classic radio. Well, tonight I'm kind of boring, Ty. Miller Lite. So I went on my big camping trip a week ago. Tonight I was on it. And
there's
it was a 4-day
nothing that
trip.
says camping more than Miller Lite, for the record.
Well, I should say big fishing trip. Yeah. And you know what? I didn't even need to bring it because before we left, 2 of my uncles and one of my cousins, plus myself, so the 4 of us went up in 2 separate boats. I was told I didn't need to bring beer. I was in charge of coffee, cream, and catching fish. I guess that was it, because I'm the one who caught the most fish on the trip. But I also, the first full night, so we left on Thursday, got in Friday night, Ty, pulling in at the end of the night, my motor broke. And all Saturday, all Sunday, and then a 3-hour and 20-minute troll with my trolling motor into the marina Monday morning. It was a long trip. I was very upset because I felt like one of my uncles decided to take their sweet time closing up the hunt camp and not tow me in. So
that sounds like every time I make a comment in our home league, it's just a 2-hour troll. Everybody's getting roasted. So
yeah, but I ended up going
actually might change my
battery.
team name to Jeff Ross in that league.
Roast Master General. You could.
Yeah,
be
I don't know
General.
if anyone in my league's smart enough to get it though. So we'll leave that.
Well, someone in our home league changed their name to Injured List, and I'm like, come on, man, I can totally put you go
Well,
pound for
the
pound with you on
whole
injuries. I
every
picked up
fantasy
Brad
team
Keller
is
on
injured
Thursday,
risk.
Ty. He got hurt
I
Thursday night. Like,
saw that.
what can I do? I can't even drop him because I'm so low on roster space. So anyway, or sorry, for moves left to go. But
Well, let's get started, Robbie,
yeah,
because like we can get into the long tooth of this stuff.
Yeah.
But let's kick it off at first base. This is a position we've talked about a lot, being really boring, right? It went from being one of the fantasy sweet spots to being a place where good players go to walk, more or less, right? Like,
yeah. I know
like the
VP league,
power.
perhaps it's more important, or sorry, not more important, more exciting. But yeah, if you're playing standard 5x5, you are not a happy camper this year. You're probably just stuck with whoever you drafted because no one's like come out of nowhere and taken a top 10 ranking.
No, I agree with that. There are some interesting guys at the position. The only guy that I think a lot of people would have given up on that has had a phenomenal season is Joey Votto. I mean, this is a guy
Yeah.
that had the pedigree, so we shouldn't be surprised that there's a bounce back here for Votto, but definitely one of the guys that's one of the better storylines. Probably the reason, if a big reason or the reason that Cincinnati's in the playoff hunt. That's an obvious one. I think that's probably my biggest shock. I thought we were going to continue to see that recoil out of Votto. I'm a little surprised to see the step forward. I like it. I've been a Votto fan for a long time, so I'm excited to see the power. Imagine what he could have been with that power in his MVP years, though. Like that's
That's
the
exactly
crazy
right.
thing.
If he had changed it up, so just so everyone's aware, in an 8x8, he is the 42nd ranked player. So amazing. Now the season line in 360 at bats, so lots of baseball left. 54 runs, 28 dingers. That might be a career high. That might be real close to one if it isn't already. 82 RBIs, which is just a great, like he's going to be triple digits by the end of this year. Great start for him. A stolen base, 53 walks, 103 strikeouts, and a 275 average, but a 931 OPS. Joey Votto has been beautiful. And the only league I own him in, Ty, is the Real Money Auction 30-team league. And he cost me $14 and I think 50 cents. And I looked at it because that league is so damn competitive. And with contracts, I felt like I had nothing in my system that was going to come up over the next 3 seasons. And I gave Joey Votto, I believe, a 4-year contract because I was like, well, until his contract is done, I am going to, keep with him. And I'm like, the worst case scenario is he's Albert Pujols. And I mean that, is what we've been seeing with Pujols, right? But best case scenario is exactly what's happening right now. So for our 5-year rankings, we had Votto at 21. He has been a top 10 type guy this year. And it looks like this is a changed player.
Yeah, it's a totally different player. I will say, though, the power was there, but not to the way he's using it this year. It was a different kind of power. A lot of fence scraping, little oppo slappies, and full pull jobs when he wanted to do it. But he had 37 home runs in his MVP season in 2010, 36 in 2017 in his runner-up MVP season. But we're on that kind of pace, right? He's at 28, as you said, and this is a very good baseball player. Always has been. Just a bit of a different profile, which is nice to see, given what we've watched over the last couple of years. Let's talk about a couple of the guys that have really been an awesome surprise this year. I think Brandon Belt has to be number 1 on that list, if not number 2. I mean, you love to see it. I mean, I love what's going on in San Francisco. I love a good underdog, always have, always will. But this is a scenario where this team, I saw a tweet yesterday, and I'm trying to remember who it was from, but it had said a shocking revelation to know that the Giants are number 1 in home runs, yet not one player on their team has 20. That is a crazy statistic. Crazy statistic.
Wow.
It was Mr. Alex Fast. That's who it was.
Okay.
But that's a crazy stat. And I did appreciate it because it is what San Francisco's doing. It's a full team game. They're taking advantage of the platoons. They're doing all the right things as a team, which we've seen change in baseball over the last 15 years or so. Seen a lot of individual performances be important to the game of baseball. Whereas this Giants team, like a guy like Lamont Wade Jr., who we talked about a couple weeks ago with the heavy split platoon profile, and Darren Ruff on the other side of that, like those are half a good baseball player, right? You put those two together, that's a very good baseball player. Tampa Bay's been doing it for a while. This is San Francisco's version. So you throw all that together, you add a good player in Brandon Belt, who is a free agent this season or this offseason. It'll be really interesting to see what they do. They just re-upped Brandon Crawford this week. Brandon Belt's going to get paid. Left-handed first baseman with a little bit of position flexibility. I mean, I think he's destined for the AL, in my opinion. But we'll see. A team like Detroit would be very interested in that left-handed bat for a reasonable price point for what they get production-wise. He's used to the big ballpark, so he's not going to be scared of that, right? But I'm excited about Brandon Belt. I think he has to be moved up on our list because he is just on the back half of his prime years. So there's still good baseball ahead for Brandon Belt.
Yeah, and so if my audio just changed, it should have improved because I just realized I did not have the right microphone plugged in. So hopefully if it was choppy before, we're back to that silky smooth. But anyway, one of the things with Brandon Belt in 227 at-bats, which that's a problem in itself, is the injuries, and he's missed time. Bereavement list this week is crushing me in a couple leagues, but 19 dingers, and as Ty said, not yet 20, but 40 runs, 40 RBIs. So not huge, but good. 3 stolen bases. Strikeout to walk is a little north of 2-1 with 79 Ks to 35. The average is not helping too much, 242, and that's because the last month has been a little bit rough for him, but the OPS is just a hair under 900 on the season, but the OPS the last month has been 950. So whereas his season totals are a little underwhelming, when he's in your lineup, he's a much better player. And that's one of the things with so points leagues, if you're going, point per game or PPG, Brandon Belt is going to be a very good player. And as Ty said, into the future, we should still see that going. So he was ranked 31st for us this year. Guy that was at 30, we don't need to go too deep into. Bobby Bradley with Cleveland. A couple things that have gone well for him this year is the K rate has not been the atrocious fear that we thought it would be with him, where he wasn't going to be able to play Major League Baseball because all he was going to do was strike out. Now, Bobby Bradley has also not lit the world on fire. He's got 62 strikeouts for 18 walks in 150 at-bats. High K rate, but he's still been able in that time to mash with 11 dingers. It slowed down, what was it, an injury or something? Injury, demotion, whatever it was that happened to him. He's only got one at-bat prior to tonight in the last 2 weeks. So I'm not exactly sure if it was, I think it was an injury. It was an injury. But anyway, 213 average on the year, but still 800 OPS. So Bradley is getting it done in the sense that the expectation for him over the next 5 years, which is how we do our rankings, was that it was future production. We're getting a little bit of it now, is nice, but Bobby Bradley in the 30s, or at 30, I should say, is going to move up into, I think, the upper 20s, which has a lot more to do with people ahead of him falling back more so than it does his performance. The other thing that's a big plus to me, Ty, is the fact that Cleveland is just shoveling out every veteran that they can, and it'll basically just be his job. Like right down to, Jake Bauers being gone. All of those kind of threats that we had seen earlier, they've been brushed aside. It's Bobby Bradley's job.
Well, and the one thing that I do like about Bobby Bradley is the exit velocity, right? Like, you don't hit baseballs hard if you're not making good contact, right? Like, even the strongest of players have a low exit velocity if they're not making square contact, right? So that's the one thing I do like about Bradley. So to me, this is a little bit more about pitch recognition, and I think that can be coached a little bit, because when he does pick up on the pitch, he's squaring it up. And I think that's a really interesting piece to keep an eye on in the future.
Okay.
But he's definitely his splits aren't terrible on pitch type. So there's not a distribution. The off-speed stuff is really the weakness. Like, breaking's okay, but change up splitters. So again, pitch recognition, that's going to be the room for improvement we're going to see heading into spring training statistics for Bobby Bradley.
Yeah, another guy who, Ty, you were higher on, I would say even in 19 than now, Michael Chavis, who in Boston, you talked about change of scenery. He was traded at the deadline. He's now in Pittsburgh. Since the move to Pittsburgh, the line looks deceivingly good, 348 average, 913 OPS. However, that's in 23 at-bats. So in that time as well, only one dinger. But hopefully Pittsburgh can be part of the improvement for Michael Chavis, because it kind of seems like he is in trouble of becoming that can't get it done in the big leagues guy. but he is still young enough and certainly has enough baseball in front of him that he should be getting an opportunity with Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh's system is just perfect for a guy like Chavis. Like, he should be able to come up and get the at-bats and run with the position because he is, I think, 4 years of control beyond this season. So he is the right kind of guy for Pittsburgh to be using to bridge the gap to whatever super prospect they think they could maybe develop from that, but get MLB quality from Chavis in the meantime. But again,
to me, this fits the Pirate profile, right? If you look at the guys like Jordy Mercer, Adam Frazier, like all the guys that have come through over the last decade or so, he's that
Josh Harrison.
Yeah, Josh Harrison's another good example. Versatile, gritty, mediocre at everything kind of guy. The one thing here with Chavis that I think is a little bit different, there's a little more pop in that bat than the guys that I just mentioned in that list. Like, I think
it's because he was suspended for PEDs. Is that what you mean by the pop?
Pop, PD, whatever you want to call it, all good. There's going to be some home runs here. I'm not too worried about it, and I'm still in on Chavis. Like, I'm not bailing. I think there's a baseball player here still. And if you think he had a chip on his shoulder before, he certainly has one now.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
And there's nobody in that infield that's going to steal some opportunity at second base from him, right? Like, not for the foreseeable future. There's shortstop coming. Cabrian's at third. He's not touching that position, but he can play first or second, and Pittsburgh doesn't really have a long-term guy there unless you're a really big believer in Colin Moran.
Mason Martin. But anyway, he's still got work to do. He's got work to do. But in the meantime, as we know in baseball, you sometimes just need opportunity. Last year, Jared Walsh with with Los Angeles Angels was given opportunity in a crowded first base scenario. He was able to carve out in 99 at bats, 9 dingers, 293 average, 970 OPS. Amazing. And a strikeout rate under 15%. This year, he has basically, Ty, been progressively worse every month, to the point that now we are, over the last month, at a 218 average, a 639 OPS, and only 1 dinger and 55 at bats. Now, for the season, he's over 400 at bats, 23 dingers, and the line looks decent. 52 runs, 73 RBIs. But it started so hot for him and has cooled off so much that I feel like his 16th rank is perfect. That's where we had him headed into the season. The difference is that we thought 16 was aggressive, but could shoot up. Now it looks like right in the middle of the pack is going to be perfect for him because he's got something to prove rest of season to dynasty owners that, as Govier likes to talk about, the juice is worth the squeeze for Jared Walsh into the future. Because if not, you got to move off quickly while there's still some value there, because people are going to be able to look at the stat line and be like, okay, 23 dingers, by the end of August, and then whatever he does in September, they're going to be able to sell 30 bomb power, which should mean 70 runs, 80 to 100 RBIs, depending on that Angel lineup, which when we discuss some of the other guys in the ranks, you'll understand maybe why the RBIs aren't through the roof. But Walsh came out of nowhere last year, looked great, hyped in the offseason, and started really strong. But as the Angels have fallen apart, as he's gone with them, he's gone in that direction.
Well, and Ohtani's slipped in the second half, right? He still hit.
Back off the MVP.
He's still been okay, but same as Vladdy, they both are showing some wear and tear here as the season gets long.
It's almost like the All-Star break is not scheduled for the best time of the year, and it would be better if it was done, say, at the end of the year, and then nobody would care about it. But at least then the players wouldn't have that extra 5 days of media and the games and all the other crap that goes along to promote baseball, and they could just be better baseball players with 5 days off. I don't know.
I don't think that's the issue, though. I think this is just two players having the first long season of their career. I think they're both in the same boat. But the point I'm making is around Jared Walsh and the fact that he doesn't have that protection. He doesn't have Trout, he doesn't have Rendon, and he doesn't have Ohtani going at full tilt, right? So you take that out of a lineup and you have guys like Phil Gosselin hitting in the 3-hole.
Right.
And that is not okay. No. That's not a successful strategy.
Brandon Marsh, Joe Wendell, they're supposed to be the big prospects that come up and join those core pieces. But instead of joining those core pieces, they're like, boom, okay, now you are those core pieces. And David Fletcher's still slapping the ball around, but he's not protection, right?
No. No, I mean, he can't protect anybody from any physical.
But he does put the ball in
scenario.
play. He does put the
Yes.
ball in play. So
He protects the blowout by chipping away at singles and runs and that sort of thing.
he keeps the inning going too.
But I do like what LA has done with Walsh and Adele, planting him at the back of the lineup. We'll touch on that a little bit later, but I do like how they've handled those kids. Most organizations don't do a great job of that. So fan of that there. Speaking of organizations that didn't do a good job handling players, Rowdy Talese is in Milwaukee now. This is what we know Rowdy Talese is, Rob. You know, we talked about this and have talked about this, and maybe me longer, but I think you're in this court now too. Rowdy Talese is a good baseball player, right? Said that when he got traded, said it long before that. We're seeing very similar production right now in Milwaukee as to what we saw last season when he was playing for the Buffalo Blue Jays. But the reality is here, yeah, it is. Yeah, huge power bat, and still just figuring it out. I think this is a 40 home run bat at some point in his career, whether it's next season or the one after. I think as long as he can put a full season in, we haven't seen him do that yet. So big asterisks on that. But I think a healthy, full at bat season, and I don't know that he'll get that in Milwaukee yet either.
Right.
But right, assuming he's given that opportunity by someone, there's a 40 home run bat here. And you know, I think he can hit 290, 40 home runs. So
okay, I don't see that average in him. I saw the 283 average he had last year in 113 at bats. That was a real high, and then an injury when he was at his high, so he didn't ebb and flow. Whereas this year, I mean, we know he was up and down. He's only got 250 at bats right now, 10 dingers. But last year in half the at bats, he had about the same amount of stats and power. Yeah, like we need to see more from Rowdy. We had him ranked at 15th, which I think was the intelligent move because he was definitely not a top 10 guy, but he certainly had the promise, but then he didn't get the playing time, which again, we discussed was a concern. And now he's in Milwaukee and he's in this weird platoon with Castellanos, and it's weird. But anyway, yeah, Rowdy Talese is definitely moving back for me from the 15 ranking. It's a matter of how far and what happens in Milwaukee in the offseason. Like a lot of people talk about just the individual talent of a player, but you also need opportunity to play. So if Milwaukee does some things this offseason where, you know, Vogelbach's gone and any of those other, and we call them threats because they're threats to playing time. Any of those other threats to playing time are gone, then Rowdy Talese can carve out more at bats and we can see good players. Eric Thames is an example of a guy who I guess he was also with the Brewers, playing properly, they can put up the numbers in 400 at bats, and that can get them to earn that extra 50 at bats to 450, where all of a sudden they become top 10 type players at their position.
Well, and this is the thing that I didn't like what Toronto did with Talese, and I'm not liking what Milwaukee's doing. Like Talese can hit lefties, but for whatever reason, they keep platooning the kid. Like I don't get it because he's shown that he can hit the lefty. His numbers against the lefties are respectable. Yet they continue to roll out these weird platoons. Like even if he couldn't hit the lefty, like Keston here can't hit anything. So I don't see why that's a beneficial split, right? Like
what I was going to say, Ty, is I don't think it's that Rowdy's not playing because he can't hit lefties. I think it's that Keston Hura or another Milwaukee player is playing because they can, and that's all they can do, and that's what they're trying to do. Is Talese is certainly further back on that depth chart because he wasn't able to hit the ground running with Toronto this year and ended up, you know, back in AAA. So I don't want to go too long though, Ty.
One last thing, and then we can move on though, because I think it's important. So versus the lefties, his OPS this season 769 in Toronto and 881 in Milwaukee, right? And so small samples, right? To be fair, but still good enough to deserve a chance because he has 7 hits and 20 at bats since he's joined Milwaukee against the lefty. So that's what I'm getting at is there's a ball player here. People just got to get out of the way.
Well, Milwaukee's also a winning team, right? So they're playing smart baseball, not opportunity baseball, right? If he ended up in Pittsburgh, we could have that same conversation that we did about Chavis with Talese, and maybe that's where Talese ends up this offseason. Who knows, right? Ben Cherington's there. He's already taken a swing and a miss on Anthony Alford, who is a quad A player, as we now know. If you're not sure, if you have no idea who we're talking about, former top 100 prospect across the board with everybody, all the talent in the world, could not put it together. Still rookie eligible, though. still rookie eligible because he's been so bad. He has not yet been able to earn 130 at bats, even with Pittsburgh. Two guys were left on this list: Lewin Diaz, who was ranked with Miami, who was ranked 14th with us. We did discuss him when we did our top 50 prospects review episode, which was the previous episode. So go back, click on that one, get your listen on, and we discuss him in more detail so we can skip him now. And an unranked player in our list, which exceeded 50 guys, was Patrick Wisdom with the Cubs. Ty, I 100% excuse us for not having it. He had zero track record in MLB. And those 2 at-bats last year just told us all we needed to say, right? 0-2, Patrick Wisdom, scrub. But realistically, Patrick Wisdom came in at the right time with Chicago. I think it was Rizzo was down, or Bryant was, one of them was down. I think it was Rizzo, and he got in, and then he had all those dingers right away, and everyone's like, whoa, Patrick Wisdom, great, and scooped up across the waiver wire because he was hot, but he's been able to sustain it, even though he had a little down period. 255 average on the year, 882 OPS, 23 dingers, just under 50 runs, just under 50 RBIs, even has a couple swipes, but a 5-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio. And the K percentage is, where are we here? About 30% or so, something in that range. So this is a power hitter who's getting his opportunity, and good for him. We'll have to really look into rest of season before we know what to do with him come off season.
Yeah, sliding into the keystone position. We've talked a little bit about him already. Keston Hiura, probably the biggest disappointment on the prospect list, I think, for everybody in fantasy baseball at this position. So, Robbie, I know you're a little bit of a believer, or were a believer of Hiura. Where are you standing at this point?
So I no longer have a Keston Hiura share in Dynasty. And the reason being, I ended up in a position in a salary league where I was able to trade Hiura. I can't remember exactly what else, but he was the big piece, and I got back the rest of this year and next year of Chris Bryant. And that was the deal I had to make on my competitive team. And I mean, Hiura isn't playing Major League Baseball now, right? Like I'm trying to think of who it is. And I couldn't remember when we were talking about Talese. I couldn't remember who Talese is sharing time with. But anyway, Keston Hiura just cannot get it together, but he's good at AAA. 166 average this year. Last year was 212. Now we're talking fantasy stats, which is why we're not getting into all the minutia of exactly what the struggles have been. But 17 dingers over his last 380 at bats is the only thing that's decent. But the rest of it is just not good. And, the strikeouts, 76 plus 85 over that same 390 stretch. Like, my gosh. And it's just been gone. We changed the way he hit. We had him ranked as our second baseman. We hated how weak second base was, and he has done nothing to help that. So it's a full reset, and now he's like a first baseman.
Well, and this is a guy that, like, I was out on long time ago.
Yeah.
And he hasn't fixed it, right? Like, there's guys that have issues that fix them. He's not one of them. And I think that's just, we've seen the outcome of that gap. I'm just surprised the industry as a whole, including Major League scouts or so-called like MLB.com professionals, ranked him as high as they did, because it was obvious, in my opinion. And a lot of guys next on the list here, Biggio, very similar, right? Very
Absolutely
disappointing for a lot of people. I mean, I think the pitchers realize that Biggio's not swinging at things, and so they pour in the strikes early in the count. And guess what? Like, it's not minor league baseball where you're gonna face a lot of 2-0 counts if you're not swinging at stuff. Nope, you're gonna be down 0-2, and that's what Biggio's faced. And I think they've sent him to the minors for the purpose of figuring that out, but he hasn't. And it's very disappointing. Toronto desperately needed his left-handed bat, and he let them down that way. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him in the offseason, if anything. Yeah. But I think,
just knowing
it could be really good for him.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good point. I was going to say, just knowing where he is on the depth chart will be important for dynasty owners this offseason. I mean, this is a guy who came out of nowhere as a prospect in 18 with a big year at AA. And then everyone was like, oh my God, look at this guy, OBP king, right? He takes the pitch, he can walk, blah, blah, blah. And then, like you just said, Ty, well, it's not that he's taking the pitch because he's smart. He's taking the pitch because he's expecting a ball. Like, it's not like he's Goldeneye, right? Which I believe Goldeneye means you can see really well strikes. I've just made that up.
Never heard that before, but I mean, I don't even know.
I'm drinking Miller Lite. It's a little gold on the top and GoldenEye, James Bond, accurate. You can make the connection. You can make the connection.
Yeah. So continuing the trend here, Gavin Lux also fits the profile.
That's the third straight second baseman who's sucked, and Lux was just sent down too. Oh man.
Well, I mean, Lux is a little bit different because he's in the deepest organization in baseball. So, that's a little unfair to completely throw the kid under the bus. But he's had 3 seasons here. We're not talking about the AA depth. We're talking
he's not
about
a Mariner.
the league roster. Yeah.
Oh, hey.
So Gavin Lux is just
Lux also, Ty, was a de facto. Yeah, I was going to say he was a de facto like number one prospect for some people. He was the big dog and people were all over it. And, twice now, flat on his face, a 175 average to finish last year, 221 if he is done for this year, 221 average and 285 at bats. So the 350-ish at bat numbers look horrible. And Chris Taylor looks great. So, he was 17th for us because we weren't sold on him. And leading into the next guy, Chris Taylor, 28th for us. Just chugging along, like bonus baby with Chris Taylor. If you have him in dynasty leagues, if it's keep forever, I don't know why you wouldn't just ride it out with him right now. Go through the offseason. It doesn't matter what the Dodgers do. Dave Roberts is gonna carve out a role for him, and he's gonna play.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, like Chris Taylor, honestly, with that depth, the exact same conversation. I just didn't expect him to get the at bats, and I think that's why we had him that far back. Like Chris Taylor just goes in these waves, very similar to like Jock Peterson, where he's like super great. Then he goes away for a while, and then he has huge clutch at bats, right? They're very similar that way. Obviously Jock is now in Atlanta. Sweet catch last night to end the game. I don't know if you caught that one, Robbie, or not, but let's move on to a guy that's been a disappointment as well, mainly because he didn't reply to you on Twitter.
It's that he didn't agree to come on the podcast. And Shedlong now, well, that's part of not agreeing. He read it. He read the tweets. He read the DM. But anyway, four out of the 5 guys now. But twice this year, Shedlong has been put on the 60-day IL. And I think this one had a lot more to do with just removing him rest of season and creating a roster spot off the 40-man. And it's terrible. But I mean, what do we have to go by? The big thing that I thought he was going to bring was the ability to steal bags. One of the things I really count on in some of my dynasty guys, especially at second base, is the bonus of stolen bases. And in 228 at bats the last 2 years, we've seen 5 stolen bases.
Well, and the reality is, like at this point, you probably should be shedding him from your lineup.
I hate that it's insulting, but your delivery was bang on, and I do agree with it. I think shedding should have been done long ago.
There you go. There we
Boom.
take that home.
Double it.
Next on the list here is one of our favorite guys, no gloves, Joey Wendell. Just a baseball player, right? Like if you are a fan of the game of baseball, you cannot dislike Joey Wendell. He's just a ball player. We've gotten less at bats this season than I thought we were going to get for Joey Wendell. I think that's the big surprise for me. I thought we were going to see him. I thought we were going to see Yandy Diaz start to fade a little bit more, but he stole
starting every day. Yep.
He stole a lot of those at bats that I thought Wendell was going to get. So disappointing, still a good player, still filling a lot of gaps, still doing the Tampa Bay thing. I don't think there's much else to say about Wendell. He's just the same old mediocre guy that we've always seen.
Well, if you're in 5x5, you've probably dropped him by now because earlier in the year he was producing for you, like even into June, into July, he had 7 dingers, 6 stolen bases, nothing the last month. So August has been a very empty month for him. Power, everything has been down. So Joey Wendell on the downside. But again, Joey Wendell was ranked 23rd for us because we weren't sure what we could count on for playing time. Somebody else, Luis Garcia with Washington, we were like, oh yeah, like there's no way that he's going to play this year. He came up last year for that little bit and that was the end of him. And again, this year, he got a little taste of it, but it wasn't until what I'm calling a surprise trade with Trey Turner because they still had a year left of him. And he's been up now. He came up, he had, a 2-dinger night, something like that. He came up, he was hot, and now he's learning. His average has been anywhere from 200 to 250 any week since he's been up. And what's the at-bat total been? 113 now on the season, 95 the last month. The kid's learning. But remember, he's doing it all. This is the trial by fire. So while every owner was like, well, now I'm not going to trade him right before the trade deadline because they're like, Luis Garcia's up, he's hot, he's doing all these good things. Wait till this offseason and go scoop him up because he's going to be worth nothing to whoever has him. And he's a starting, shortstop, second baseman for Washington. It should work out long term. But right now, having him ranked at 30th seems about right for us a year in because we weren't sure what was going to happen this year. And even though he's going to finish this year, likely to finish this year with over 200 at bats, it's not like it's going to be shiny and new. He's going to have to grow, as we've mentioned with some of the other guys. It's going to have to be, trial by fire next year, opening day lineup straight through. As long as he's not hurt, he should be in the lineup.
He's struggling like a lot of younger players do with the off-speed breaking right now. He's hitting 302 versus the fastball. And so I think we're going to see a little bit of darkness before the sunrise kind of thing here with Luis Garcia. Still long-term concerns around the split numbers. The platoon splits is what I'm getting at there. But a guy on his team, Carter Keyboom, is another guy who we had 43rd on this list, mainly because of me, because I had him way down. Robbie had him in a more reasonable spot. I'm going to I'm going to put optimism.
Oh, I'm listening.
Carter
listening.
I've watched several games with Carter Keyboom over the last 3 weeks.
Yep.
And I'm starting to see changes that I like. The swings get a little flatter.
Changes.
And I like when it comes to corner infielders, first thing I look at, if people are like, oh, we need to see 6'4", this amount of weight. No, you want to see traps. Does the guy have traps? Does he block the ball? And can he pull dingers down the line? And he's starting to see him turn into a bit of a bulkier player, which he wasn't before. So I'm seeing the power potential start to click in. A couple of hard hit balls that I've watched, very different from what I've seen previous to this season. So I'm at this point optimistic about the potential for Carter Keyboom. I do not think he's a star. I think he is a middle of the pack third baseman. I do think that's where he ends up.
Third on your overall ranking for next year?
Definitely not. There's a 0% chance that he will be anywhere close to that high.
So like fifth.
But like to give you a profile, like I would say Heimer Candelario type production is what you might get, which is pretty good.
So I think that's a great comparable actually, Ty, because very much like Candelario, he should. I mean, we thought he was going to be this year, but he should next year be given the position, right? He should be their third baseman.
It's his right now.
Yeah, but I mean, they signed 1 million of those Estrabel, Cabrera, Castro, Josh Harrison type guys. It should just be Keyboom's position. He should finish the season with third base. He should start spring training. No one should be pushing. It should be his job to get very much like Garcia, and Washington should be seeing what they've got with them. And I like it. I like the idea that you can have a guy like that. If we go look at, we can really quickly just touch on Scott Kingery, who we had at 39.
Who?
Exactly. We were not big on Kingery. Even when we had Ellen Adair on with us, she's like, my God, I just don't know what they've done with them. And it seems like, like the Phillies through that contract offer ruined him. Well, he's off the 40-man now, and he's not killing it in the minors. So Scott Kingery at 39 is certainly dropping further off. We've got Nicky Lopez, who has just been kind of empty, average, lucky. I don't know the best way to describe Nicky Lopez other than he shouldn't be doing what he has been doing. It's not overwhelming, but the frustrating part is that it's providing value. So people are interested in Nicky Lopez. We had him at 45th because we know that he shouldn't be Kansas City's shortstop. He shouldn't be their second baseman, but Mondesi can't stay healthy. And he just, finds a way to put the ball in play. Very much Ryan Goins reminiscent to me, where you looked at Ryan Goins and you're like, well, that's not an everyday player. And then you looked at some of the stat lines at different points in the year and you're like, that's not bad. You weren't happy to have him in your lineup, but you were like, there might be value there. And I kind of think that's Nicky Lopez. And the final guy here is Vidal Brujan with Tampa Bay. We already talked about this before with the prospect episode. So just really quickly touching on him. We had him at 32nd. We were not sold on the time this year. He came up, he wasn't ready, right? Everybody at AAA that saw him was like, oh my gosh, this guy, he's ready, blah, blah, blah. He came up, couldn't do it. And now he's back down. So yeah, like wait and see. We'll talk about Breon more in the offseason from a prospect standpoint. And then the last guy, Ty, who we had at 59th, which I believe was the final spot in our rankings, was Nick York with Boston, because we were told by some smart people like Reese White and Mason McRae, who said, well, he's a ball player. This wasn't some weird draft thing. Like, he's an actual ball player. So in listening to some of those guys, we did a little bit of work. I'm like, maybe we will see him. So let's throw him on the list at 59. Looks like he's done well for himself so far. And we should see him we should see him within this 5-year span. It's just at what point?
He's a 19-year-old in his first season of professional ball, and he's got 11 dingers hitting 327. Yep. That's a guy.
The worst part of him? Kid's a Red Sox.
Yeah. Yep. Poor guy. I definitely thought you were going to say he's from Newport Beach, but okay.
I'm just sticking straight with the Red Sox.
Like, what a bad trade, though. Like, oh, I'm from Newport Beach. Where'd you get drafted? Boston. That's a tough trade.
Everybody would say, where'd you get drafted? Canada. Oh, right? That'd be the worst one. Not even Toronto, just Canada.
Right. Get here.
But, even our own players after 2 years just finally got here last month. So let's move on to the hot corner.
Govier is basically moving in. So third base here. This has been an interesting position this year. So much good, so much bad, but some exciting stuff. So let's get the bad out of the way. Rendon, just a wasted year gone. I think you can blame it on the goatee and the half a mullet thing he's doing. That is it needs to go. I better see clean shaving next year. You need a change, sir. It's disappointing. We have no reason to spend too much time on him.
I agree. Injured. That's all. Rendon's injured. So
it happens. It does. Like, Mike Trout's in the same boat. Like, these things happen. Alec Baum, on the other hand, is not that. He's just disappointing. Now I think this is what I always like to target, right? Like, for me, as a fantasy player, Alec Baum is the perfect target because he's having such a bad season that sent down. Yep. He's now a guy you can acquire, and he's huge, and he hits for contact up until this season. He will figure it out, right? Those are the guys I like to look at because he's a big guy and he hits for contact. Those two things are going to come back. So I'm buying low. I always like to buy low on guys like this. Like, I still own Nomar Mazara in several leagues.
Man. In several. I like that it's not I still have them in one spot. Like, I still have them everywhere I play fantasy
the nice part about several is that could be 2.
Right.
That could be 7 or 8, but it's definitely 2.
You're like, and if we're counting the best balls, the drafting holds, let's just not talk about it.
but the point is that these are good opportunities to win, and depending on your format, those are both very deep leagues. So that's why I own him in those leagues. But Alec Baum is a guy that you should own or want to own in every format. We've seen this where guys recoil and come back. I talk about Tyler O'Neill would fit this profile of a guy that was supposed to be great, and then everybody shit on for 2 years, and then, everybody wants a piece of Tyler O'Neill right now, right? So this is the next guy of that cut of cloth. So go buy Alec Baum. You will be happy with that purchase.
So here's one that this was my pick for NL MVP because of the news in the preseason that he was going to spring training, he was going to shift to shortstop. So in 425 at bats, we've got 56 runs, 23 RBIs, 66 RBIs, 23 dingers, no stolen bases, 3-1 strikeout to walk ratio, a 172 average, and a 627 OPS. That's right, everybody. Hey, Eugenio Suarez. He was our 11th ranked, which, just to clarify, Rendon was 4th ranked for us and Bohm was 6th. So Suarez outside the top 10 at 11. It has been horrible this year. And there hasn't been that 2-week stretch of 10-dinger tear where you're like, there it is. None of it. It's just been empty stuff here, empty stuff there. It's as if Cincinnati has a 14-run game and that's when you'd have 3 RBIs. It would just be when you're not necessarily when it's not impacting overall. So Suarez has really, really been hurting fantasy owners because he was, I think, a top 60 type guy overall, depending on exactly on your format. And I'm scared for his future. There will be a lot of questions this offseason about what happens, where he goes. and exactly what we can expect. And one of the things that sucks to me is that we've seen Cincinnati screw up middle infielders before, and it wasn't what 5 years ago that Scooter Gennett was a middle infielder, and that they had what was the speedy guy who was with the Mets for a bit this year, Jose Peraza. Was one of the others. Nick Senzel, like the list goes on of guys they haven't gotten right. So I don't know that I'm going to trust them to be able to do that. Now we do have other players we're going to talk about with Cincinnati as we go, but certainly warning signs here with Suarez.
And this is a guy, like, he's going to find himself on a 1-year Robbie Ray pillow contract, right? Like, he's going to go to Arizona or Kansas City or somewhere that has an opening at third base and just try to recover some value. I don't think it's going to be there. He still plays reasonable defense, right? This is a converted shortstop, right? So he has the arm, he has the range, and that's why he's getting run out there every day, because it's certainly not the offensive side. But when I think of Jose Suarez, I think of like a TikTok trend, the one where the guy comes running in and goes ding dong. That is 100% what Jose Suarez is. Provides no value or no context, just ding dongs here and there. And that's really it. So a guy that's complete opposite this season is Austin Reilly, who has had 2 absolute torrid runs, right?
Yep.
Like, he's had 2 very significant stretches of baseball. And ironically, both were when Atlanta was playing their best baseball. One with Ronald Acuna Jr., one without. And Reilly's turning into the player that we want him to turn into. Now, it's not unreasonable to expect a power bat to go in these sort of cycles where they have it figured out, they're locked in. Every power player does this, right? So don't be surprised by that. Don't be shy. Austin Riley's a good baseball player. So I think we're out on, is Austin Reilly for real? Like, he's obviously for real at this point. And I think that's the takeaway for him at this point. And realistically, because the position's not that deep, might find himself in a top 10 this time next year, right? Or
absolutely
even in the offseason.
I agree with you there, Ty, because I think when I look at Bohm and Suarez and I think about what's expected the next 5 years, well, Austin Riley's production and opportunity trumps both of them. And I don't know that I would put him up in the Rendon conversation. And the next guy that we're going to talk about, Chris Bryant, I don't know that I would put him there. But, I mean, that's thanks to Chris Bryant having one heck of a bounce back. But Austin Reilly is still right in the cusp, which will be top 10. I mean, we'll have to really let's wait. We'll table it.
So let me get this. I just want to ask this question. Are you taking Chris Bryant 5 years over Austin Reilly 5 years?
Yes, I am. And I don't know where Chris Bryant's going to be, but I do know that I would prefer to have Chris Bryant's bat to ball skills and consistency that I perceive him to have over Austin Reilly. And here's why, because I have this thing where I am anti Devers. And this is all because I, had him early in 18 and blah, 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 burned in 19 and all that crap. So because of that, I see some Devers tendencies in Reilly, and I have some concerns about the hot cold, just like Aaron Judge, and those kind of guys in week to week can be the guys that win you your week, right? But also they can be the reason that your team falls flat on its face. So if you're in a points league, Austin Reilly at the end of the year might have a point per game average north of 3.3 points, which would be pretty good across, all platforms. But he might have stretches where he's under 2 for 2 or 3 weeks, and that's crushing you, and then he'll be over 4. So that imbalance to me is a little harder to take than a guy like Chris Bryant, who I think could just chug along and get those numbers. Now, Chris Bryant goes and signs, I don't know, pick a worse spot for him to sign, and then going back to the Cubs, pick somewhere terrible for him. And if he does one of those things, then that could affect it. But if he was to stay with competitive teams, which I feel like he's the kind of guy who wants to put himself in that environment, may I introduce you to the Toronto Blue Jays? That would be kind of interesting, to see where he could go in a ballpark that would suit him. Now, another guy who will be, I think, Ty, making a huge jump from 29th for us, could be into that top 10 category, is Jonathan India, who's having himself a perfectly fine rookie season, 78 runs, which is great, and 59 RBIs, back of the lineup, 17 dingers, 9 stolen bases, a little over 2-to-1 strikeout to walk, but not much, 270 average, and an 840 OPS. Good stuff here for Jonathan India's well established himself in Cincinnati, and happy to see him. We talked about him on the prospect episode as well. So Yeah.
Definitely. And if Ian Anderson is out for much longer, probably the rookie of the year in the NL at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now let's get to where I feel comfortable, Ty. Let's talk about some Mariners. Now, I will say these are pseudo Mariners because in order for Ty France to show up with the Mariners, that meant my boy Nola got shipped out. But we had Ty France at 49th this year, and some people were like, what's up with that? Why would you have him that far back after he finished last year, 141 at bats, a 305 average, and 836 OPS? And we said, have you heard of a flash in the pan? That was our concern. We didn't know what was up with Seattle, how they were going to move everybody around, what the depth chart was like. Playing time was a concern. Well, you know what? We were wrong. Ty France in 449 at bats, so regular playing time, has 67 runs, 16 dingers, 59 RBIs, strikeout to walk ratio, a little north of 2-1. But he's been good. Like he's been a good player at a 290 average and 817 OPS. So I'm happy to be moving him up. I don't know, 20 plus spots, 25, 30 spots, even in the top 20 for next year. I don't know if I feel like he's moving, like he'll be second base. That's going to be his thing for next year. He's not going to be at the third base. He'll end up at second base next year. And depending on what's up with Seager, the next guy, Abraham Toro, might find himself getting a whole lot of helium all off season long. Since the trade in 100 at bats plus, he's hitting 324 OPS over 800. But let's keep in mind, this is supposed to be a power guy who in the last month does only have one dinger, 8 prior to that in 100 other at bats. So I don't know if this is streakiness, Ty. I don't know if this is the move to Seattle and the lineup and what's going on here, but we had Toro at 53rd. Obviously, that was related to where is he going to play in Houston for a year. So that was going to affect him. And how is he going to get into the lineup come 2022, right? You gotta earn your spots. But he moves to Seattle. Things are looking up. That infield has just parted ways where, Dylan Moore can't get a hit and Ty France is doing fine and Shed Long is out. And Corey Crawford had a stretch. So there's Corey Seager is chugging along. Like there's opportunity, but there's also production. And Evan White just, injured and disappeared. So it's been a total facelift in Seattle.
I do enjoy that you named JP Crawford, Corey Crawford.
Sorry.
And then what was the other one you said?
Evan White.
No, before that. Who'd you say before that?
Dylan Moore?
No.
Did I say Corey Seager and I meant Kyle?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. You named two.
I should have got them all wrong. Yeah. So when they traded Aaron Nola, there we go. I'll just get I'll go back it all the way up to Nola. Anyway, the last name and the team you're on.
I enjoyed it. It was my amusement. I'm letting everyone know I enjoyed it.
I'm trying to think of anyone else that I could screw up at this moment, but I don't know. Seattle's done a good job of screwing up with their prospects all on their own. But let's get off third base. Toro will be a good point of conversation this offseason, and what happens and how it shuffles out with that roster will be important. Again, DePoto's contract, I believe, expires at the end of the season, and it has not yet been officially renewed to the best of my knowledge. Again, much like Shed Long, he does not return my tweets.
If they let go of DePoto at this point, they're idiots because he's done a phenomenal job with that team, as them set up for the future, and they're one free agent signing away from being where they want to be. So,
and James Paxton doesn't get hurt, Ty. This could be a much different scenario, right? Like don't have you have a guy who has talent, and of course he gets hurt, right? Like that's what he does. But let's just say he gives them even 100 innings. Maybe that changes.
Evan White's been a bum this year. Kyle Lewis has been a bum this year. Kalenick's been a bum this year. Right? The whole group has let him down. So that's not on the GM. That's on the players. But he deserves to be there. He should get another shot. I think he'll get it. Moving into the shortstop position, let's start with the big money guy here in Francisco Lindor, because I know people are loving to shit on that contract right now. But I don't think it's worth $300,000. He's not in the same worth of a Fernando Tatis Jr. Like he's just not. And I think this is a classic Mets move for me. Right. But I am buying Lindor everywhere.
Really?
Anywhere I can get my hands on Lindor. I've talked about this many times, Robbie, and when I say it, it will click for you again as to why I'm excited. Okay. This is the classic change of leagues recoil.
Okay.
I talk about it all the time with guys that go from one league to the other. They see new pitchers, they have new teammates, they've got new environments. There's so much that can happen. We saw it with Rendon. We've seen it with a lot of guys going specifically AL to NL because you see a little bit different pitching styles in both leagues because of the way the double switch impacts the pitching in the NL. You see different pitching repertoires. So this is something that Lindor is a good hitter. Like, you don't just forget how to hit. And it's not as if he was a guy that was hitting balls to left center or dead center and was late. So a dead pull hitter. So he will figure this stuff out. I'm very confident that he will, and I'm willing to take contracts, length, whatever, to own Francisco Lindor anywhere.
I think you'll be successful in some of those ventures because there will be several dynasty owners who are thinking to themselves, okay, here's the last 2 seasons, right? We've got 500-ish at bats. We only have 19 dingers. We only have 14 stolen bases. We've got 20% K rate, which is fine. It's fine. But the average is going to be the big one, right? Like a 230 average over that time, just over 710 OPS over those last 2 years to this point in time. And like you said, everybody just crapping on him. And I think when everyone's crapping on him, it's easy to just tag on. Now, I will say that your idea, your theory is very interesting. And if you take into account the fact that last year, half of Lindor's games or more were played against NL opponents because of the constrictions of that 60-game season, that could be the reason, could be part of the reason why this is extended right now. So he went from playing against NL Central teams to NL East teams this year, as well as the rest of the league. So it could be this, but again, also, he was hurt and it's just been rough, and the Mets. So, yes. But Lindor was third. He'll definitely be getting kicked back in our rankings. Somebody that we were already hesitant on. I don't know who it was in the offseason who wrote, I can't even remember what it was. It was something I saw on Twitter or some question we asked and they responded to it. And the guy was like, Mondesi is a top 15 player. It was some ridiculous thing. And I was like, what? Wait, hold on. How? What has he done that did that for you? And he's like, he was the best fantasy player in September last year. And I said, okay, that's not a season. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter. And this year, he had 219 at-bats this year. I mean, injuries, right? Injuries galore, but it does count, right? Talk to Dave from Rotosaurus if you're curious about how you can win in Dynasty, how you can win in anything, in any league, redraft, whatever, if you are stacking up the Mondeses and the James Paxtons and the bounce-back type candidates, you're going to be screwed. Because you have to get consistent guys. Mondesi hasn't proven to us that he's a consistent, healthy player. Juicy, drool-worthy stat line. But even this year, it looks great. 1,200 OPS, 361 average, but 36 at-bats. Yeah,
that's not going to cut it. Yeah, and that's what he's become. He's become the what-if guy, right? And a guy that we both have a certain spot for. DD is next on the list here. We had him at 13 at the shortstop position. He's getting old. Right, the quick twitch fibers are starting to fade. You can see it. Still plays a good shortstop. Still is a significant bat in the lineup, but he has to fade, and the numbers have started to fade. So I think the power totals are just going to disappear. So if you aren't in a winning position, you're trading DD this offseason, or you should be looking to move him if you can.
And you're not getting much back either, Ty, because it's been ugly, right? Like a 220. No, it hasn't even been 220 the last month. Oh, wow. I was trying to find one good line for him. I can't even I can't find anything that's promising. But the line on the year is all disappointing, right? It's under 700 OPS across the board. It's under 220 average across the board. But tonight, Ty, he was 3 for 4 with 2 RBIs. He's had a 750 average since August 28th, which was, midnight to today. But it's been rough. And I've got DD in a couple spots and I'm hanging on to him. And I think he's going to end up being one of those guys that if he fades and becomes nothing, meaning, just no contract, like Batista, right? No contract, floats around. I'm going to end up wearing it in a couple leagues because I don't think
he's still got a 1 more year though, right? Like he signed two with Philly, did he not?
No, I think he just re-signed with 1. I believe that's what happened.
Positive it was a 2-year deal.
Okay,
I'll look it up.
Well, someone with 4 years left, Ty, is super, super easy for us. Our 18th ranked guy. Hassan Kim. A lot of the 18. It is okay. Well, my mistake. Yeah. Oh, okay, good. I'm glad he gets to go back. Hassan Kim with San Diego. We talked about it on the prospect thing, so you can go back with that. But I mean, growing pains and who's shortstop in San Diego. So we got to see what's up rest of the season with this guy to really get a grip. But I mean, a move well back from 18, possibly into the 30s, could be a bench player for next year and then have to carve out a role. Uphill climb for him for sure. Now, someone who's going to go up the list, I think, inside our top 10, based on, the contract that I think he should warrant, is Marcus Semien with Toronto. It's been great to see him. I mean, the 20th ranked player in 8x8, Ty, 509 at bats. That's a huge reason. So far, of all the players we've mentioned, most at bats of any of them. 91 runs so far this year, 77 RBIs, 32 dingers, 13 stolen bases. Strikeout to walk ratio, none of it is horrible. 50 walks, 123 strikeouts. So if you count Ks as a negative, yeah, that sucks, but he's also drawing walks. So you've got that balance. 867 OPS and a 269 average. Marcus Semien should get a big fat contract this offseason. I mean, he's making $18 million this year. So it's not like he took a discount to come to Toronto. He basically got the qualifying offer. Oakland wasn't willing to pay him. But I'm like a Marcus Semien long-term. I hope he sets himself up in an offense like Toronto so he can continue to do this, because like the guy's a beast. Like we were 2 years ago, Ty, I think we were having conversations like he's off to a hot start, sell him. And he's been able to prove to us over that time, even with the dip last year, which again, short season, as you talked about, having to take on NL West. Now the guy's a beast. That's it.
I'm not as optimistic with Semien long term, and here's why. I don't think Toronto's going to re-sign him. I think he's a free agent. They're going to let him go in the wind, and he's not going to be in a better situation than he is right now. Like he's got 4 or 5 really good hitters hitting behind him in Toronto, and there's maybe 3 lineups in all of baseball that's plausible. San Diego, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox. None of which need him, right? None of them need him. So the situation cannot be better. It cannot be, and this doesn't mean you have to trade him,
right?
But I think this is his peak value, though. So, like, depending on where your roster's at, what your team looks like moving forward, this is a guy that if you're not planning to win in the next 2 or 3 seasons, you need to capitalize on and pull back some huge value, because this will be the most you'll get. You will not get more in the next couple of years.
Okay, so he's a take him and run this offseason, but I guess what's going to really need to happen is you either jump before he signs or you take your chances and wait until he goes somewhere. And depending on where he goes, that's definitely going to affect the trade value based on that, whoever it is that's got him. So somebody who has now, Ty, gotten himself in the right spot after not a shaky start, but just not a lighting the world on fire start, is Wander Franco with Tampa Bay. In 200 pro at bats, or MLB at bats now, 270 average. OPS is starting to creep up to 800, 780 right now. Only 6 dingers. That's the thing that everybody thought was going to come over time, and that's more than likely to happen. But 1 million runs for this guy. My gosh, 39 runs in 200 at bats. That is awesome. That's elite. That is, there's luck in that, of course, because he's not hitting himself in more than 6 times, but he also has 29 RBIs and 2 stolen bases. So he's settling in. The walk to strikeout over the last month has been cut down, and it's good. He's a little over 10% on strikeout rate and just under 10% on walk rate. We're seeing him round into form. Wander Franco, good bat to ball player. Yeah, that's all I got. Like, he's ranked 22nd for us because we didn't think we were going to see him this year.
Yeah. I'm still not sold. Like I'm coming around a little. The power for me, and it's not to do with the fact that he's not going to be. When we said this too in our recoil from what the industry was saying, it's not that we don't think he's going to be a major league player, because he's already that, and he's going to be that. I just don't know, and I still feel this way, that he's a superstar. Like if you're saying he's better than Fernando Tatis Jr., I'm going to tell you go pound sand, right? And that's kind of the position I have with him. Like I think he is Willy Adames with a little bit more batting average. Like,
well, let's talk about Willy Adames then, because that was the reason why Wander Franco was a little bit suppressed to us because it was, why would Tampa Bay not have him? Or sorry, why would Tampa Bay promote Franco when they've got a perfectly good Willy Adames? Well, Willy Adames is 265 average this year. Okay, not crushing it. 835 OPS. Wait, what? Yeah, that's right. 22 dingers, 67 runs, 65 RBIs, 5 stolen bases. The strikeout rate's a little concerning, around 30%. The walk rate is not ideal, but he does still have a counting total of 50 walks this year. But he's been good, and he's over 300 average the last month, just under 1,000 OPS, a lot of power coming from him. Again, a division leading club with the Brewers. Things are looking good for Willy Adames. It wasn't that Wander Franco was bad. It was that Willy Adames was blocking. And then it was, Willy Adames long-term could be hurt because of Franco and what was going on with him in Tampa. Well, Adames was 28th for us. Franco was 22nd. They're both performing at a good clip over the last 30 days. It's not the worst setup. There are worse positions to be in as a fantasy owner to have Willy Adames. In our big money league, Ty, I was able to pick him up for TJ Zoik. I know we talked about a deal with Zoik, and then old Roto Ronnie came along and nobody wanted to deal with him. I think because he's annoying, but he was trying to trade Willy Adames, and I eventually was like, what's it going to take? And then he asked about Zoik, and I said, well, I kind of got something worked out with Ty for that. And then as soon as I said your name, he's like, well, that's the guy I want, and I'll pay all of the contract. So I had to say to you, sorry, I need to make this deal. And he's been good, right? Like Willy Adames is good. I don't know where he's going to go next year. I don't know what's up, but he's proven to be a really good shortstop and on a division leading club. That's a great thing to have down the stretch for all those dynasty owners. Another guy
Absolutely.
who I was certainly concerned with, Luis Urias, Milwaukee Brewers, second base, third base, shortstop. We had him at 47th because we didn't know what in the heck to do with him. And after last year's 239, 602 performance with all of 0 dingers in 109 at bats, I don't blame anybody who would have sold, but he's turned it around this year. Good for him. 17 dingers. Whereas Keston here has fallen on his face, Luis Urias has become a major league player. 240 average, 246 average, for the year. OPS 775. Strikeout to walk is 2-1, and he's around 30% strikeout rate. The counting stats should finish, 80 runs for the year, 75-ish RBI, something like that. And maybe you could have 7-8 stolen bases. Nice to see. Urias will be moving up next year. I think he's not shortstop, so we'll see where he lands exactly. And that's a good turn of events, right? When you've counted him out, he was already like failed team post hype, and here he is. But I think he's 25 maybe. Still a young player. We talked about Luis Garcia before. We also had him ranked in shortstop ranking at 94th because it was a much deeper position. And then the one guy that we didn't have was Ramon Urias with Baltimore. And I mean, we're not saying we won on this or that we're brilliant or anything, but he came up last year in 25 at bats. The line was, bloated, 360 average, 967 OPS. But for this year, he's held his own. Thanks to Freddie Galvis, multiple injuries, and eventually a trade. He's got a 282 average, 795 OPS, 7 dingers in 216 at bats. So the counting stats are pretty good for 260. For 216. He's got about 30 runs, 30 RBIs, and I'm liking him. I picked him up in a few 30-team leagues, Ty. I picked him up north of the 200th pick in our prospect drafts because nobody had an eye on him. And sometimes you have to look at a guy who gets time in September and think to yourself, is it logical that he could be the 28th guy on the depth chart? Meaning he will get playing time. And that's kind of what I did with him. Mercedes was another guy I picked up in a league. Same idea. And sometimes those guys pay off.
I love watching you do it. I mean, I've talked about it all the time. Like, you're the best at grabbing guys like this. I've seen a lot of different fantasy styles, and you win way more games with shitty players than anybody I've ever seen.
Thank you.
And it's impressive. It really is impressive. Like, you watch the waiver pickups, like for anyone that's not in a league with Rob, like you watch the waiver pickups and you're like, the hell is he doing? And then you watch it unfold and you're like, oh, okay. All right. That kind of worked out a little bit. It's not how I do it. So I sit there and I try to learn because there's things
I will say this,
that I just don't.
In our home league, you both dropped and picked up Daniel Lynch, which is a classic me move with prospects where I give them a couple starts. I'm like, nope, I'm done. I'm done with you. I hate you. And then wait a second.
You haven't
Oh,
seen it
is there-
because I also picked him back up again, and he started for me this afternoon.
No, that's what I said. You dropped Daniel Lynch, and then you picked him back up because I
Yeah.
was looking. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get Keller. So I picked up Brad Keller, who, as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, immediately got hurt. And because I have so many injuries, and in this league, we are capped. It's a fun rule. We're capped at 40 pickups for the year. So you can make unlimited trades, but you can only pick up 40 guys off waivers, which means you're dropping 40 or, injuries, whatever happens. But I've got, Kershaw in this league, Bauer, Hector Yohn. I've got it doesn't matter. Just think of a decent pitcher that's hurt. I got him. That's my pitcher. But somehow I've been able to get like Cal Quantrill to get it together for me. And, I'm making a run. Like it looks like I might win this week. I could jump in front of you and be in 4th or 5th by the end of this week. And that would be amazing because I've got Acuna hurt in that league. I've got Kyle Lewis hurt in that league. But it's a 14-team league. So the same depth and like the moves that I'm talking about with, Ramon Urias, I don't make those moves in that league. In a smaller league, that's not a move. But in a 20-team league where you have sharks who pick up anyone with prospect type, you have to go to the guys who don't yet have it. That's where Jared Walsh comes in. That's where Urias comes in. And that's where even trying to pick up a guy like Luis Garcia in the offseason becomes hard to do because the guy that's got him kind of has you over a barrel because he's like, well, I mean, he's going to start. I'm like, right, but you've got 3 legit shortstops. He's like, yeah, but I'll just leave them in my minors, or like depending on how your league works, right? So you've got to be able to work within those rules. So another guy, fun, exciting thing, he had a great start. Raphael Ortega started the year, I think it was in the Atlanta organization, or at least when we wrote this up. Initially, he was with Atlanta. Now he's with the Cubs. But Ortega, who last year saw nada, nothing, and this year at 188 at bats, has been good. 298 average, 824 OPS, but the last 2 weeks has cooled right off. He got 6 hits and 40 at bats the last 2 weeks. But Ortega, we had at 194. So I'm calling that a win for us, Ty, because we don't know what we're going to see rest of career for Ortega, who I think is 29. I think that's right. 27 something. Regardless.
Ish. Yeah, it starts with a 2.
Yeah, I was going to say we had him on the board as somebody to at least draft, right? He was rookie. I think he was rookie. I don't even think he was, actually. I take that back. But regardless, we had him on the board at 194. So we noted him just because there are a lot of those guys who, like Urias, who I just mentioned, who were not rated by us, but we did get him. Yadiel Hernandez with Washington's another one. This is just an opportunity guy. Right. I knew he was a star in Cuba, came over. He wanted to make it in MLB. We've seen this with Japanese players and stuff like that. Hernandez in Washington lucked into playing time, and he's done good things with it. I don't know what his contractual status is with Washington, but in your dynasty formats, he's going to be rookie eligible the rest of, depending exactly on your league, but a rookie this year. So whereas he was somebody that somebody would have given you in any deal if you happened to acquire 6 weeks ago, there might be a bit of a price to pay for him. I would consider. I will see what he does rest of the year.
He's pre-arbitration, not free agent.
Oh, is he?
2027.
Whoa. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So he's screwed. So, well, you know what, Ty? I'll say that actually increases his stock because the likelihood that Washington would take him back, it would be up to him, I guess, to get a deal done with a Korean team or something, Japan, whatever, to leave for a $3 million deal. Otherwise, he'll end up back in Washington next year.
Well, he's going to have to if he's in the major leagues, right? Like he's Washington's property until the end of his career. Basically, he's 33.
Right.
He's eligible for free agency in 2027. So
wow, I did not. Yeah. Okay. Well, the next guy up, this one, Ty, I put in here. I think this is just it's not an error, but this is somebody whose career has turned. Let's see. What's the best way to put? He's now. Pardon me.
Right down, backwards, sideways.
No. He's stabilized himself. He is what we thought he was, but he will continue to get opportunities, and that's Adam Duvall, who we had ranked 144th, but yet again this year, crushing bombs, 28 this year. The average is never anything you want, 224. The OPS you can deal with, 760 for the year, but a little better the last 2 weeks at 850. So up and downs with Duvall. But again, I think it was a 3-homer night last year, something like that kind of put him on the map, where he had like a really big week or something like that. But that's what Adam Duvall does. He gets on a hot streak and he rolls.
Just brutal against lefties. That's the thing. Like he's 22 of his 27 home runs are against righties, right? So his average this season is somewhere between 167 and 176, which is the averages split between Atlanta and Miami against the lefties. So that's really always been the thing. He is maybe the best left-handed platoon hitter in baseball. It's very close. If he's not number one, he's probably in the top three. So I think that's just what Duvall is. So if you see him rolling out against a righty, you're hitting the plus button. Let's go. Let's do it. But
daily lineup league, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So Brian Goodwin's another guy. Now he's only on here. I ranked him on 122nd. He was a free agent when we first did it. Then he ended up with Pittsburgh. And I was like, well, that's a good thing, right? Because we talked ad nauseum about how much Pittsburgh sucks. Well, apparently they're not that desperate for MLB talent because they even cut him. But then he ended up in Chicago where everybody was just falling off a cliff, injured, and hot start. Now he's cooled off and he's, just becoming a guy on that team. But good to see Brian Goodwin has been able to extend. I don't think we can have any real hopes for him next year. If a team like Pittsburgh isn't interested, I don't know what his true MLB interest will be next year. So if you got him, this might be the final ride for a guy like this. So another guy on a final ride, Ty, I'd like you to disagree, is Nomar Mazara, because I think he'll be pretty good in the Mexican League next year.
No, he's definitely still a major leaguer. I just think
not currently with a major league.
Yeah, I think there's there. If Nomar Mazara is listening right now, go read a book, learn about physics, and learn about how to put some lift on a baseball, right? Because the kid can hit, and there's something here. But if he doesn't figure out how to put some lift under a ball, it's always been his thing. It's always been the roadblock for Nomar Mazara. He's still, and this might surprise some people, he's only 26.
Yeah.
Like that's like 2 years after some of the college bats people are drooling over. And he's got 7 years of major league experience.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like think about it. Like that's insane. So there's still enough here. He just needs to find the right hitting coach that can literally like stand eye to eye. And instead of saying, how about we try this, just slap the guy and say, wake up. Right. Because there's like, what kind of 6'4", 225 major league outfielder doesn't go Yahtzee? Like, let's go figure it out.
Yeah, it's been rough. Now to move on, we did talk. I don't know if we did talk about Jaren Duran of Boston.
I have.
Well, you have, yes, definitely. So you can circle back to those episodes for Ty's points. But Duran, basically, Ty, as soon as you said overmatched, all these things, he kind of came out of his shell a little bit. Now, in 65 at bats, 246 average, 612 OPS doesn't sound great. It was a little better before he was called back up after being sent down because he got 2 hits and then he's been 2 for 9 since his recall. But Duran, up and down, he was our 100th. Why was he our 100th? We didn't think we would see much of him this year. It was either going to be opening day kind of thing, or who knows when he would come in. So
I'm moving him backwards, just so you know.
Oh my goodness. So just so everyone's aware, so Nomar Mazara will still be in Ty's top 15, and Jaren Duran will be outside the top 100. So that means in a 15-team 5 outfielder league, Ty wants nothing to do with Jaren Duran, but get you some Nomar.
5-year window, I'll take Mazara over Duran.
Oh, I hope that we remember this.
Yeah, I hope they do too, and I hope that everyone remembers when it goes the way that I think it's going to go, because Duran cannot hit fastballs up and away, he cannot hit off speed low and away, and the major league pitchers will figure it out. Yep. And Duran has 0 power if he stays on those pitches. 0. The only reason he has any power is because he sells out on the inner half. It's the only reason he has power.
Well, let's talk about a guy.
Will exploit that.
Let's talk about a guy that does have power, but for whatever reason, the organization is just screwing with him as best they can. Edward Olivares with Kansas City, 259 average, 807 OPS, 5 dingers on the year, and only 58 at bats. The production should be there, Ty, if he was to continue to get opportunities. The last month, he's hit 4 dingers. In 26 at bats, he's hit 4 dingers, but he keeps getting sent down. 86th outfielder ranking for us. I thought that was a little far back, but excuse me, Kansas City is proving us to be correct, and it sucks because this should be a guy who's top 50, especially after the Jorge Soler trade, which, by the way, is working out dynamite for Jorge Soler in Atlanta. Can't speak on behalf of Edward Olivares with the playing time in Kansas City. Now, there are other factors in Kansas City that we talk about on a different podcast, but just so everyone's aware, 86 for Olivares is still fair value, because it's unclear what in the heck Kansas City is going to do with him, right? He's back up now. Is he going to stick around? What's going to happen? Another great question mark, and a guy that, I was listening to Votto talk so highly of last year, talking about the breakout in that 137 at-bat season, because it was power-filled, right? It was 8 dingers and 854 OPS for Dylan Moore. Well, this year, in more than double the at-bats, he's got 10 dingers, really comparable run numbers. He's got 31 runs, 37 RBIs. If it wasn't for the 18 stolen bases, of which he had 12 last year, by the way, nobody would roster him anywhere. He's still 31% owned on Yahoo. I got to be honest, I think that's a lot of inactive people because he's not providing us with anything right now. 119 average over the last month, 3 stolen bases. You can find 3 stolen bases with a 250 average if you're streaming. So Dylan Moore falling off a cliff. The spots I do have him, I was able to pick him up before the 2020 hype season. So where I've been able to extend him or have him for this year, I've just benched him because I'm waiting to see if there is a turnaround. Now, it doesn't look like there is. I don't know what Seattle's going to do with him this offseason, but I guarantee you he's got a major league job come, April 10th next year. It's a matter of what team and what the role is, and I'm sure it's going to be a bench role, ideally still in Seattle, because I think that's where the most opportunity will be. But Dylan Moore has just, as a speed guy, he's terrible. But like, because that's
baseball player, he's terrible.
Well, I was gonna say because he's got multi-position eligibility, he should still have some value. But if anyone this offseason is trying to hype anything at all about Dylan Moore and the stolen base factor, completely ignore it. Like, he is your absolute redraft final pick, your free agency, whatever, however you do it this offseason, no matter the size of your league, he should be the final piece of your roster. At no point should you be looking at him for like roster construction. Like this is your, I don't even know who else to pick. Like this is worse. Is it worse than? I'm just trying to think of like stolen base guys that could be that's all they could provide. Yeah, Gerard Dyson. There you go. He's Gerard Dyson right now. So keep that in mind, everybody out there, that like Dylan Moore, I thought was poised for a breakout. It seemed to me like that's what he was going to do. Clearly it's gone the other way, and the value needs to reflect it this offseason. If anyone is hyping him out there, huge grain of salt.
Yeah. Next on a guy that I was definitely not excited about, but has produced this season, Jesse Winker.
12th overall, Ty. 12th overall in 8x8.
I still can't wrap my head around that level of success. Like, it was never that I didn't think he would be a major leaguer again, or at least an average or above average guy, but to be this good, I mean, I still don't quite fully understand it. Like, against lefties, he's hitting 176. Like, how are you producing at a 307 clip when against lefties you hit 176? Like, why are they pitching to you? Like, why are they throwing you pitches if you're right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, pitch around him. If you're right-handed and you're a pitcher, don't throw him
mad
strikes.
at his success. But like, Jesse Winker has been an average guy through the minors. He was an average guy. He was a 1-for-1 strikeout to walk. So that's how he was on my radar. He was never a top. I don't even know if he would have been like an MLB.com top 50. He was never a top prospect, but he was a prospect of note. And then he came up and he did the power thing. And the power thing is your average drops. You're trying to hit home runs, your strikeouts, you're 3-1 strikeout to walk. Then you're 2-1. Well, now he's getting back in, right? This year, 75 strikeouts in 53 walks in 420 at bats. Now he's hurt. He's resumed baseball activities. Hopefully we can see him back at some point before the 10th of September. I need him for some playoff stretches. The guy's good, Ty.
Well, but here's the thing. He's probably going to have 150 hits by the end of this season, and 25 of them are going to be against lefties. Like, what are you doing, major league pitchers? Get your shit together. Like, sorry, but like, come on. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, good for Jesse Winker for finding his niche.
There
I'm
you
certainly
go.
not
That's
mad
what
at
you
him
needed to say.
Yeah, I'm not mad at him. Like, good for you. But like me, like as a pitcher myself, this is stupid, right? When you have a guy that has that much of a discrepancy, like it is same with Adam Duvall, same conversation, right? So anyway,
Yeah, there are
moving
ways
on.
to mute them depending on the lineup that they're in. So as much as you dislike Jesse Winker's success because you feel it should not exist, you have talked to the Dingers listeners for years about Tyler O'Neill. Here is your moment. He was ranked 55th for us. I think I had him 218th, and you had him too. Tell us why Tyler O'Neill is doing what he's doing.
Well, I mean, no Marmot.
Enjoy the
sorry,
moment.
Tyler O'Neill is fantastic. So you know, this is the kind of guy that I talked about. Like, this is who we've been looking for and waiting for with Tyler O'Neill. I'm actually shocked to see the power flatten in the back half of the season. I think this is very similar to what we talked about earlier in the episode about guys that fade in their first full season. This is the first long stretch for Tyler O'Neill at the major league level and all the stresses that come with it. So I think we're just seeing the power slope at the end. I think we'll see it
still average though, Ty, right? Last month, 290 average. So
yep.
4 dingers. So it's not like it's a limit. We've talked about some other guys who have kind of dropped off a cliff. For him, it's just taking a tick back, like maybe 2 dingers, right? If we've seen 6, that'd be good.
In a strong 4. September, we might have 30 home runs here, right? Like it's very plausible.
9 away. Yep.
Very, very possible for that to happen. You know, I'll say it's unlikely, but it's possible. And in 845 OPS, like that's what you want. Like that's a phenomenal outfielder in that category with those stats. He's helping you in 4 or 5 categories. You know, stolen bases, he's in double digits, so a nice little plus there.
Yep, absolutely. Which I didn't think that was part of his game. So that was nice fast. To see.
Yeah, he's not lightning, but he's kind of like, and we talked about Kevin Biggio earlier, like more of a smart base stealer, right? Teammate Paul Goldschmidt also back in double digits. Fun fact.
And batting second. Goldie was second tonight in the lineup.
He's raking right now.
Yeah.
But anyway, Tyler O'Neill is honestly a very similar player to Paul Goldschmidt, with a small reduction on the hit tool side. Like that, like Goldie is a better bat to ball guy, but the rest of the profile is very similar.
Who else is O'Neill like? Who is he like? How he's like Acuna? He's got stolen bases.
No. I said Goldie. That's the guy.
That's the okay. I was gonna see who else Goldie we could get you to.
Yeah, like Goldie. If Goldie's a 60 on the hit tool scale, and Tyler O'Neill's a 45,
59.
50, 40, 45, 59. Right. The rest of the profile is very similar.
Yeah.
Right?
No. Hey, there's nothing. There. Like, I mean, you've got him in your dynasty leagues. You've got him in the keeper redrafts. You are not just saying you guys should consider him. You are also a guy who has him rostered. So that's one of those things for me where when I have shares of the guy, I feel more pride when they're doing well, and I wear it more, like the Dylan Moores, when they're doing poorly, because it's like, this is somebody I thought good things of. They have or have not done it, but hey, it's on my rosters. Like, this isn't just received us talking.
Multiple comments about Tyler O'Neill and be like, wow, you really stole him from me. Yeah, I did, because you didn't listen. And so, you know, that's it. And that's I'm more happy about the fact that I robbed people in that trade because they gave up on him too early than I am proud to be the guy that's like, hey, I'm Tyler O'Neill. I'm the Tyler O'Neill guy. Like, no, I'm happy that I robbed people I gave up. That makes me happy.
I look at similarly at Austin Reilly in that vein. I've had him in spots, and people have said, you know, I'll give you this, you know, very poor return. And I'd say, no, I want to see what I've got. And that, as a dynasty owner, that's my favorite thing to do, is to say, you know what? I know it hasn't been promising, but I believe that this is going to happen. And when you already have him and you don't have to, you know, make that trade of whatever asset it is that you may have, because if you're playing dynasty, right, most of the guys that you have are there because you believe they will be good. So making a trade can be difficult. That's where your prospects, you have to separate with your prospects and have those guys who have hype value, which I will give Rotorani credit. He talks about that, you know, they're just an asset. But at the same time, I would say maybe half of my prospect pool in any league would be those asset-y type guys, and the other half would be guys I actually think will make an impact as players on my fantasy team. And having a guy like Tyler O'Neill for you, Ty, absolute victory. And I hope he finishes strong. And I hope we get to go into the offseason and start to listen to every redrafter and all of those people with the very large platforms just go berserk over the potential, because they're going to see the stolen bases that they don't realize are there right now. And they're going to be like, wait a second, X stat this, and check out the righty lefty splits. And now I can see a scenario where with the Cubs getting worse, you know what I mean? Like it's easy for people to tack on 20% production on a single stat because of something that they can just make believe.
I'm more excited in the redraft breath to see what people do with Jarred Kelenic because of what people were doing heading into this season. Just watching how wrong people are going to be when they roll him way back in their list. Because Jarred Kelenic is a baseball player. He's going to be fine. He's going to be good. If you own him and you trade him, you're an idiot. And this is a scenario where he is a great baseball player. He's just learning in a way that in 2021, with all the media around these guys, people are uncomfortable. He's not the first star to come up and struggle. He will figure it out. He's too good of a hitter, and he'll be fine. So just be patient, and it might take one more season. Like if you're in a dynasty league and you're listening to us, like it might be one more year of pain, but he will get there. Just wait.
And keep in mind that it's not like Seattle's been pumping offense or anything, right? They had a rough stretch in May that tanked a lot of their hopes, and they've still been a good team since, but they had that rough stretch that has just put them in a rough spot where they were just getting pounded. And Kelenic's been brutal. 217 at bats this year. It looks ugly. But that's one of those, like Evan White is another one of those guys, right? There's a bunch of dudes on this team who could come back next year and collectively get it done. What was it? Luke Longley, Ty. I randomly hit up some, documentary on him. It's on YouTube. That's youtube.com if you guys have never heard of it. And it's a Luke Longley. Basically it's like The Last Dance, because on The Last Dance he was not part of it. Even though he was filmed for it, he was edited out, so his story was never told. And this was the documentary that talked about it. And the big thing, and the reason why I'm doing this and going off topic when we're already 90 minutes in, is that he talked about team chemistry and how he was drafted by the Timberwolves 7th overall, and then traded, I think, after his rookie season. I don't know if it was I believe it was in the offseason, but whatever. He was traded to the Bulls the year that Jordan retired to go to baseball. So it does have a baseball spin to it. You're welcome. And then he was, there for that year. And then all of a sudden he came back. Well, he talked about how there wasn't chemistry in Minnesota. It was a very competitive environment. It was very hard because they didn't all get along. Well, we've seen and heard about how Toronto gets along and how they're doing very well offensively, and it's a very happy clubhouse. Seattle needs that same culture. They need to be able to have happy players that are successful, not guys like Dylan Moore who are like, what's going on, shaking their head after the games. They need the Ty Francis, the Abraham Toros, the guys we've mentioned tonight to be part of that positive change. And Jarred Kelenic can be one of those guys that can, feed off of that. Just because someone has one season where it looks like they've just had their teeth kicked in, it does not mean turn around, walk away, get what you can for it. There needs to be some logic behind it. And a guy like Gavin Lux is one of those guys who I'm not sold on. It's going to be a long road for me with Gavin Lux, but Jarred Kelenic is, again, somebody who I'm like, I'm not willing, just like Ty said, not willing to get rid of because it hasn't been great, because I don't think it's been great in Seattle. I think it's been rough. They've had issues this year, before the season started with management and not Votto, but there's also been word from Kelenic about Votto essentially saying, or not him directly maybe, but indirectly, if he didn't sign a contract, he wouldn't be up. All sorts of crap, right?
And I think it says a lot more about Scott Service, the manager, right? That team has had all kinds of stuff around it, and that team has just powered through it. So
great
guys
bullpen.
that have not, speaking of powering through it, Ramon Laureano powered through some drugs this offseason. And now he's powering through some 80 games on the sideline. And so he's obviously moving back. I said this, Robbie, and you'll recall this. Like, I could not figure out how Ramon Laureano was good at baseball. Now we know. Because there was just this weird jump from, irrelevant baseball player to fantasy darling. And, at the end of the day, like, he's back to a relevant baseball player, in my opinion.
It was the final stretch in 18 that he came in That's when he broke in and rookie eligibility and all that. And then it went away. Like he finished his, in 18, he was no longer, by the end of 18, he was no longer a rookie, but he was like, whoa, look at this guy. And then he had that shortened season in 19 and everybody started to like collect the stats. Well, if you count his 2 samples, he's a beast. Well, then he came out in 2020 and in those 93, again, injury, 93 at bats, a 183 OPS, or sorry, 183 average, 469 OPS. And nothing, no power in that 93, and it was always hurt. Well, maybe he's hurt because he needs to recover faster from those injuries. So what did he do? A little cheeky, cheeky, cheeky. That's the sound of a needle, if you guys didn't know. And then 205 at bats before the suspension this year, 210. So fallen off a cliff. Sorry, I'm looking at David Dahl. I'm looking at David Dahl, the next guy. But anyway, Ramon Laureano, apologize for the stats. It just was not good when I was previously looking at him. It was not good. The next guy I want to talk about was David Dahl, who's, again, just to recap, sorry, Ty, we had Tyler O'Neill at 55th. We have Jared Kelenic at 50th. We have Ramon Laureano at 49th. Laureano is going to go back a good ways for me. David Dahl is going to go back even further. David Dahl, flat on his face, rough year in Colorado. Poor guy can't stay healthy. But again, even in 209 at bats, a 210 average, not getting it done. Colorado seemed to have been able to hide the fact that he's not as good as we thought he was.
Well, and O'Neill's obviously going to go up because of where he was ranked.
Absolutely.
For
age,
for you,
success this year, and the fact that I was holding back a bit on him because I and again, the stolen bases, that's an important factor, and it also helps out in your points leagues. Even if your stolen bases are only worth a single point, it is a helpful thing because they get a single, which could be a point, and then they go to second.
We weren't going crazy either, right? Like I had O'Neill at 43, and I'm one of the high guys on O'Neill, right? So we're gonna move him up. You're gonna come up. I'm gonna come up. We're going to move him forward. Obviously, David Dahl's career really fell off the cliff when we asked him to support a t-shirt idea.
That's right.
And immediately from that moment, when no response, very similar to Shed Long, is the Dinger's curse. If you turn us down, and your career is over.
Hey, we know there is an issue with dingers and bad PR. You want to talk to Colorado about people yelling to talk to the mascot. Anyway.
Well, let's move on to the couple guys that are actually worth talking about here. Nick Castellanos in Cincinnati has had
26 for us.
Yep.
And 28th overall in 8x8 right now. Not position, 28th overall. Yep. He's had a year.
Yeah, I mean, and he's going to hit free agency this offseason. There's a 0% chance he is going to extend that contract. Cincinnati, it doesn't mean he's going to leave Cincinnati, but I do think he would be an idiot if he takes the player option here.
Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're, because he's 29, right? Like what is he now?
I'm not sure.
He might be 30. I'll pull it up really quick here while we're talking about it. Castellanos currently is 29. So he has the chance here to get another 5-6 year contract, right? Realistically, or he can stick with the additional 2 years he has to stay. 3 years, sorry, 2-year player option, after the passing the opt out, and then a 24 mutual option. So he's going to capitalize and extend that an additional 3 years. This is the best season of his career. He'd be stupid not to do that. So, I think that he's going to find himself in a good situation, right? And there's lots of teams looking for good outfielders, and he's one of those guys. So, I think he has to move up on our list. I think this is the first time I think we've seen that similar to what we talked about Austin Reilly, that stretch of consistency, right? Now we know for sure that it was never a question of whether Castellanos could be replacement level. It was always whether he was in that next tier, right? Is he an above average, bordering on elite? And I think that's where he is now, like, confirmed.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think us at 26 was definitely we don't know exactly what we've got long-term. Well, like you just said, he can opt out, go get himself a free agent contract for 5 years, like a George Springer. And then we know what is realistic to expect now. George Springer, elite outfielder, but he can't stay healthy. And you can't blame it on the turf in Toronto, because he's just got to play on it a tiny little bit. Now, the last guy that we're going to mention was our 15th ranked Joe Wendell. And Ty, I'm just going to go with the stat line here. So we are at 209 at bats right now. That's 2020 and 2021. We have only 18 runs, 4 dingers, 23 RBIs, a single stolen base. What was it? 200? What did I say? 220 at bats, and we've got 70, 80, let's call it, strikeouts to 12 walks. It's been rough. A 200 average, a 540 OPS or so. So Joe Adell with a major learning curve ahead of him. I'm hoping that the rest of this year with the Angels and Joe Madden are able to nurse him into maybe a 250 final couple weeks, a bit of power, finding that stroke that he had at AAA. Because damn fine ball player. We don't want to see the Jared Kelenic route. We want to see him keep that line up this year, because the opportunity in LA is going to be short-lived, because they need to be in win now mode, because that's the Mike Trout contract. Ohtani had a 2-year, $8 million deal. And that I do not want to be the GM with the Angels who has to negotiate at the end of 2022 with Ohtani for, I think, the final 2 years of his deal, because that's going to have to really be big.
Well, I mean, they'd be silly not to try and extend him right now. If they're not working on it now, they should be. They won him over to get him there in the first place, so you need to capitalize on that. But Joe Adell, for me, has the perfect comparable to him on that roster already. Like, his career arc to me is going to be Justin Upton, right? Very similar speed power profile that Justin Upton broke in under, and the little bit of the swing and miss tendency as well, right? So, very good comparable. And I think most people should be happy with the first 10 years of what we saw from Justin Upton, maybe not the last 3 or 4. But I think that's something that you're going to want to look to as a comparable, and be patient on Adell, because he needs to grow into that frame a little bit. He's still young enough, and he'll be fine. So very similar to what we talked about with Kelenic earlier. I'm liking what I'm seeing. Like, some of the at-bats I've seen from him have been pretty strong. Good pitches that he's either put into play or battled with or whatever, right? Like, enough for me to be excited about him.
Yeah, sometimes you look at a rookie and you think, oh, like when you're actually watching live, like the highlights are different. When you're actually like, MLB TV, you're looking at it and you're watching what's going on. You're listening to the announcer for the home team, and they're talking about their boy, right? And they're, he's up to bat. Joe Adell looks like a major league player, young, getting his at-bats in, getting his work in. I wanted to very quickly circle back to Ramon Laureano, because I duffed it, but he had a 213, 704 average in OPS last year with 6 dingers in 183 at-bats. That was a regular season. But in 341 this year, because I believe there was an injury this year, which is why I had mentioned that, 14 dingers. So the season was looking okay, but not superstar or anything. 760 OPS, which is not what you're looking for out of him, and a 246 average. Again, low average, right? Low average, low power the last 2 years, and boom, juicing. I think he's in trouble long term. I think dynasty owners who have him are in a really rough spot, because I think everyone should just say, you know what, I don't want him. It's not even, there's enough uncertainty now with 2020 that sucked, a 2021 that was not overwhelming or really overly positive, and then an 80-game suspension. So I feel like, Laureano, if you are the type of guy who has a crap roster and you're just trying to put it together, he might be the kind of guy where you're like, I'll take a chance on him if he's not going to cost me too much. Yeah. But certainly not sure that I would want him. Of this whole outfield list, high, because we took our time on that one. I feel like Hernandez could be a steal in dynasty this off season. Olivares, the hype should die down with Kansas City, and he might be another steal too. Winker and O'Neill, good luck, not going to happen. Jared Kelenic could be available, as we just mentioned, Laureano, depending on your lineup. And then Castellanos, because of that veteran thing, right? As soon as guys are 30 in dynasty, a 25-year-old is magically worth more. He could be somebody to strike for this offseason too.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's a lot of interesting pieces to that puzzle. I'm excited about, but it's a good spot to leave it. We've been long in the tooth this episode. I will end it by saying very simply, this is when you win next season, is by watching September and paying attention to growth and trajectory of all your guys on your roster as you move forward. So don't fall asleep at the wheel. Look for next season in the end of this season. But until next time, it's been Rob and Tyler here on Dingers.